is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Hey, Rob. Rob Barrett's my engineer on the other side of the glass. How many writers have come on this show, Rob, and told us to write about what we know, what we feel passionate about? Too many to count, am I right? And sometimes that means going out on a limb. And that's exactly what Martin Lee does in his book entitled The Vast Difference Between the African American and the American Negro. Martin has a degree in English literature, and for many years he was a Conrail engineer, an experience that he talks about at length in his first book that he published with Page. It's called Anatomy of Abuse. Now he's back, and I have to tell you, Martin, you are talking about something in this book no one wants to talk about.
I'm speaking about people of color in America.
Okay.
And our greatest impediment is each other. Now, what really troubles me about how we treat each other is we're always complaining about how other people treat us. And our complaints are very real because we are treated poorly. But when you look at the way we treat each other, why not treat us bad? Look how they treat each other. And every book I've read talks about the oppression of black people, and they're all very accurate. But I've never read one book that talks about how poorly we treat each other. And that's what motivated me to write this. I'll give you, for instance, when I go to an interview, a job interview, and I see someone white, Caucasian that I have to talk to, well, either they're going to be racist or they aren't. If I see an immigrant, somebody of color from another country, either they're going to accept me as an applicant or they're not. So it's either yay or nay. But if I see someone black sitting there, I don't know what I'm getting. Is he a house Negro? Because house Negroes are the absolute worst black people on this earth.
What is that?
Have you seen the movie Django?
Yes.
The role that Samuel Jackson played.
Yeah.
He was more oppressive to the slaves than the master was.
Right.
He's the liaison between the oppressive white populace and black people, the African American. The house Negro is more oppressive than racism. He's what is used to sublimate black people.
Okay.
That's the house Negro, and they're absolutely awful. They're the worst human beings I've ever interacted with in my life. Malcolm X once says he's going to spend his life telling the white man the truth to his face. I'm going to spend the rest of my life telling black people, people of color in America, the truth to their face.
That's a tall order, sir.
Well, it's one I really believe it's my calling.
You know, how do you feel about the violence in the inner cities? Do you feel that blacks are responsible for some of the things that happen?
We have to take responsibility, but the reasons that made us behave like this are not, it's really not our fault. It's our fault to get out of it. If America woke up one day and all black people were getting along, America would crap its pants. They would think that, oh, they're planning something. So to America, to the racist, the white racist portion of America, and that is not all of America, my experience has taught me that. I am not a black man who believes all white people are racist. And I want to clear that up right now. We are kept in a place if we continue to be at each other's throats.
And that's got to stop.
Yeah, that's why I'm writing what I'm writing. But you know, what troubles me is it's so hard to discuss something like this without people coming away, oh, he's an angry black man. Well, I want to say we're all angry. All of us are angry. Do all of us save for the house Negro? I want to leave this with you, too. We are not going to improve as a people as long as the house Negro has that type of mentality.
Martin, I will take your word for that. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of reaction you get to this book. I give you a lot of credit for writing about it. Keep me posted. William McChesney is making his second stop here on the Page Publishing Book Club. His first book, entitled Redemption, took place during the Civil War, and so does this new book. It's called Gabriel Gifford, Judge, Jury, and Executioner. Now, they're separate stories, but they do have one thing in common, and that's Bill's love of history and writing great stories around historical facts. So give us the story on this one, Bill.
Well, this fellow was a farmer and went into the military during the Civil War and got himself captured and spent most of the war in a prisoner camp in Macon, Georgia. And when he got out, went back home, his wife had moved on, married a neighbor, and they thought he was dead. And he opted not to make a scene, so he just took his things and went west. And he didn't make it very far because he crossed over into Missouri and took the job as the first federal U.S. Marshal there, and he single-handedly cleaned up the state of Missouri after the Civil War, got rid of all the desperados that just were gangsters than war veterans. And so it's a real interesting story, and it's based on real history.
What do you call that, historical fiction?
I guess it could be called historical fiction, but I just take real history and interweave a fictional story that coincides with real history.
Right.
So I guess you could say it's historical fiction, but if it's historical, then it wouldn't be fiction.
Right. Now, was Gabriel Gifford a real person?
Well, it's based on a real person. There's a lot of real people in it, like Alan Pinkerton from the Pinkerton Agency.
Right.
He's a major player in this. My main character, Gabriel Gifford, and him were quite good friends. And he banged into a lot of real players, people left over from the Civil War, like Bill Cantrell and the James brothers. And so the history of Missouri after the Civil War was terrible because it was one of these states where half the people were for the North and half the people for the South. And they had a heck of a time coming to grips with the peace after the war was over with. It carried on in Missouri for a couple of years, very dangerous. So I didn't have to get very far west to come up with a real good story. Missouri is all the further I had to go.
At a time when our country was really divided.
Yeah, well, so many books in that particular time period are all about the Old West. And I don't know, I feel like there's been so much done about the Old West. I try to keep my stories away from there. Like the last one we talked about basically took place in Georgia. Anyhow, maybe someday I'll write about the Old West, but right now I find plenty to do. And what I like so much is I don't really write about the Civil War as much as my players bang into the Civil War. And it's what turned their lives upside down and disrupted everything about their normalcy. And so not too many people went through that Civil War without being involved.
Yeah.
But I don't dwell on the actual war all that much. I know a lot of other writers have written extensively about Civil War and the battles and what have you, and I'll let it go at that.
Good enough, Bill. I know you're already working on another book, and I hope you keep them coming. Jeff Scott Hansen is a chiropractor by trade, and by his own admission, he says he's dealt with some interesting personalities over the years. Interesting in quotes. One day, he decided to move to a ski lodge up near Yosemite, can't blame him for that, and write this book that he had been wanting to write for years, some of it based on some pretty crazy experiences. It's called Plague 13. Jeff.
It's about this anthropologist who finds something in the Zimbabwe desert, and it's a mysterious device that shouldn't have been where they found it. It was a surprise, and they're not sure what it is, but it could be of alien origin. And at the same time, on a different storyline, there's these two brothers who are egomaniacs and are the richest brothers in the world and have enough money. So money isn't their concern anymore. They just want power, and they want to live like gods. And they collect rare things. And so the book's basically about this struggle to acquire and get this device and figure out what the device actually does. And at the same time, there's this kind of environmental disaster that's going on in the world, which is referred to as Plague 13. And that also plays into this sort of a background thing, which comes to light more as the book goes on.
Sounds pretty
In a
involved.
nutshell, that's it. I originally had the idea years ago, just a speck of an idea. And then I said, I feel like I got to write a book. And my great-great-great-grandfather, how many you got to go back, is actually Sir Walter Scott. So maybe I have the writing gene in me. That's my middle name is named after him. So I developed the characters before I wrote it. I figured out a rough plan of what I wanted to do. And then I developed the characters who would be in it and wrote a biography about every single one. Even if I didn't use that in the book, I wanted to know them really well. And I just slowly started building, adding to that little teeny speck of an idea.
So it was totally a figment of your imagination. It's not like something happened to you. There was...
Oh, no. Actually, most of the events in the book, including the initial chapter, starts out as a satanic killing. It's based on a true story. Most of the events in the book are based on true stories or people I actually know. No, it's much easier to write what you know than to just totally invent things. So, yeah, most everything in there was twisted a little bit on truth, on facts.
It's interesting. You talk about how you develop your characters. It's much the same, when you're acting, when you're in theater and you're going to play a character, you have to work up a biography, you have to work up a history. It sounds like you did that with each and every one of your characters.
Yeah, and then when I would add a character, I would do the same thing. Like, what flavor ice cream do they like? Just what genre of movies? It just so I would know them, so when the book would progress, they'd be predictable to me. Like, how would they respond? How would they react to this? Oh, that's how they would. Anyway, it was real fun to write. It was a joy. It was very cathartic. It took 2.5 years. And there's a latent message of environmental stewardship. I didn't want to write a book that just spoke to the choir. I wanted everyone to enjoy it, so hopefully I accomplished that. But there is an underlying theme which hopefully people will take to heart. But I wanted to make it interesting. I know me personally, if I read a book, if I get in 10, maybe 20 pages most, and I'm not grabbed, then I just go on to another book.
Right.
So I think my first chapter grabs people. It's that satanic killing thing.
Oh, that satanic killing thing. Well, I don't know. If that doesn't grab people, what will? And there's a sequel coming, right, Jeff? So stay in the mountains. Keep that inspiration coming. And with that, we are going to take a very, very, very short break. Do not go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. T-Bird is the pen name of our next author who wrote a children's book. It's called The Koala and the Crocodile, but it's more than that, right, T-Bird?
It's kind of a life lesson, if you will. Very similar to a Rudyard Kipling book. He wrote about the elephant getting its trunk, how that happened. And I'm writing about a koala who had life lessons to learn, and along the way, it lost its tail. The message is that basically when you're going through life, we meet different types of people or different personalities, and it's really about how to get along with everyone and still end up where you want to be down the road. this koala, he was rather rude, and he learned how to be a very giving and loving creature along the way.
Well, obviously you saw a need for this.
Yes, we live in a society that isn't always polite. Our manners have kind of gone by the wayside. And I really think that we need something that kind of grounds us and makes us a little bit more aware of the diversity of people and how to get along with everyone. I was taught to say please and thank you. You don't see that a lot in the world anymore. I'm not saying that everyone is like that. It's just that I think our children have kind of lost their way. And it would be nice if we didn't have bullies in the world, if we didn't have people who are rude or don't have the kind of thoughtfulness that we should have for one another. And I think that it's a timely message. Obviously, we're going through some really questioning things in this world, and it would be nice if people slowed down and really looked at the world the way it is and change it one person at a time to be the world that we want it to be.
That's a nice sentiment.
Actually, this is a very old story. I wrote it for my daughter when she was about 4 years old. So I have several stories. This is just the first one I've ever had published.
So you have more coming?
I do.
That's great. Did you just suddenly find the time to get it done?
Believe it or not, yes. I mean, my children are grown, and they encouraged me to get these published because they enjoyed them so much as youngsters, and they thought that it would be something that other children would enjoy.
That's great. You going to do some book signings?
I am. We are working on the New York area at this time. We have friends in Rochester and places in the New York City area that we would really like to visit first. And my daughter lived in New York on the Lower East Side for several years, and she actually is an artist, and she did the illustrations for the book. Nice. So we're working together to bring it to the Big Apple and then several other stops along the way.
Well, sounds like a plan, T-Bird. Good luck. Roger Mazzella grew up in the First Ward of Newark, New Jersey, a fairly tumultuous town, particularly in the 40s and 50s when he was growing up. That said, the name of his book is I Never Knew We Were Poor. And Roger, that says so much right there.
It's about that place being my world and the deplorable conditions of the Coldwater Flat and the conditions that we lived in. And the fact that my family, my neighborhood, the love that I had, it never occurred to me that there was anything else outside of that world. It's something I've thought about for years. And it's just recollections of an old man of what used to be and how it came to be what is. It was basically an Italian ghetto, but it was a mixed neighborhood. There was even a gypsy family that lived over a chicken market. You know, like our neighborhood, the playground was open from the end of school till 9 o'clock at night. There was indoor facilities for co-ed games, for basketball, for pool. And that was the whole existence. Go to school, come home, play. We had no running hot water, no central heating. That's the term Coldwater Flat.
Yeah.
It was extremely cold in the wintertime and unbearably hot and disgusting in the summertime.
But you were loved.
Oh, yeah. I look back at the conditions. It seems as though survival trumps comfort. Of course, we had no shower. The bathroom was a toilet, not a bathroom. And for years, I thought about trying to honor the people that gave me life and a chance. And both of my parents were dead by the time they were 46 years old. So they wrapped a lot of foresight and love and indulgence into those short lifetimes. And I don't know, I rewrote the thing a million times in my head. And then 2 summers ago, I sat down and I said, okay, this is it. never even had an organizational plan. The chapters came out as I was thinking of them. And to be honest with you, I have osteoarthritis, and I don't use a typewriter or a computer. So I would handwrite them.
Oh.
And, you know, when my hands got so cramped, I would just stop. So I would sit down for hours and write. And my grandson and my granddaughter would then, you know, go through to make it legible for them so they could type it up. But it's been a process for me. It's been something I've been thinking about all my life. And I finally got to do it. If I may, let me read you what I put as a last consideration in the book. My life experience would seem to support the old adage that nothing lasts forever. Why are some sayings repeated and others ignored? Do people sit up at night conjuring these clever tidbits? It seems that back in the day, people who wished to seem clever would throw out a quote. More recently, the clever ones, the newscasters, sportcasters, and analysts create the sayings and adages, the appellations. Curiously, the most often repeated ones are taken as a matter of fact. No research, no investigation, simply postulation. Repetition, fact, it seems to me, we often create our reality by definition or supposition. Then again, who can refute the fact that all good things, no, all things, good or bad, must come to an end? Seems reasonable, almost logical. But then there is that one in a million experience that causes hesitation, that causes doubt. A moment in time, a simple utterance. Phil, is that you? I'll be coming soon. That was my mother on her deathbed. She was supposed to be in a coma, and we were sitting up all night with her, and she came up with that as she was dying.
Oh, Roger. You know what? This interview only begins to touch on the many rich experiences you share in your book. Thank you. Thanks so much. Finally, Jesse Merrill wrote Reflections of an Old Alabama Country Boy, and boy, I can't wait to find out what you are reflecting on.
Well, my growing up and the characters that I met there, and a lot of the old stories that they told. Well, for example, one of the most unforgettable characters I ever met was my Uncle John Morris, who had a unique way, you might say, David Brinkley and Paul Harvey, when he said things. For example, you and I might say a baseball pitcher throws hard, but Uncle John would say, now, buddy, he throws blue smoke. And when some characters wandered onto a woman's private home while deer hunting one time, she poked a shotgun in their face and they had to run off. And later they were telling me what happened. And Uncle John said, I could have told him where Buddy and Alec was. There's a putting ice in her face. That was the most unique way I've heard of running. And I tell about a character, Jim Lovett, who at 90 years old climbed a tree with a power saw and chopped off a limb. And his forebears went across the Mississippi in a covered wagon, and he lived with the Choctaw Indians for a while and gave a bed to family and relatives of mine that they still have. Another character was Jess Jones, who was a very good wit. For example, somebody was talking about Lester Crawford had been converted to Christianity, and Jess Jones said, well, if Lester goes to heaven, we might as well plow up hell and set it out in collard greens. He said, he talking about the corruption in Columbiana, he said the devil hadn't been to Columbiana in 10 years. He just comes, lights on Beacon Hill, looks down, sees everything's going his way, and goes on back to hell. They are interesting. I mean, these characters like Ron Armstrong, the guy who worked on the railroad, but he was a fancy dresser. He wore Hart Chapman and Mark suit, Florsheim shoes. And one time I said to him, I said, Ron, that's a nice looking suit you got there. He said, that ain't nothing. I got a $65 Easter suit back there. I ain't never fought it in. And that was when suits were, you could get a suit for $29, so a $65 suit was pretty good.
Were you taking notes all this time, or what?
No, I was just telling about it. These are stories that I've told for years, wrote them down.
What made you finally write them down?
Well, when Daddy told me a lot of old stories, I thought, well, I don't have to write them down. I can always ask him. And then after Daddy died, I realized I could no longer ask him. I had to go from memory. And as more and more people died, I said, I better write these down. And I made notes, but I didn't really write them down. And I thought, well, my family will never know about these stories if I don't write them down. And so I began writing them down for my family. And then some people who read it said, no, there's other people would be interested in this. This would make a good book.
Well, there you go, Jesse. And you sure have plenty of stories. I can't believe how many stories you have. We only got to share a couple of them here tonight. And you sure have some memory. I will give you that. Hey, Rob, guess what? We got to go. We are out of time, but we're not out of authors. It's truly amazing how many authors we have lined up for you in the weeks and months ahead. And there's absolutely no reason why it couldn't be you. Yes. You could be on the Page Publishing Book Club. All you have to do is get started on that book. You know you've got one inside of you, one that you just need to write. So come on now, get moving. All right, we will be back next week, or you can download us anytime you want, as many episodes as you want at 710WOR.iHeart.com. Otherwise, come on back next week. Same time, same place, 710 WOR for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Have a great weekend.